Hi, I'm Brandon Shapiro. I recently got my PhD from Cornell University, advised by Ina Zacharievich, and this year I'm doing research at the Topos Institute. My research is primarily in category theory with applications to algebraic topology and various applied sciences. I'm excited to tell you more about some of the projects I've been working on. In my PhD thesis, I studied what I like to call shape-independent category theory. In ordinary categories, the shapes involved are the dots and arrows, which tell us the compositional structure that we have in categories, where we can compose two adjacent arrows into a single arrow, and do the same for larger strings of arrows by associativity. There are also two-dimensional categories, called two categories, where in addition to dots and arrows, we have globular two cells, which are these lemon-shaped cells with two stemmed arrows in them, and these compose both vertically and horizontally, so that over time we can eventually compose more complicated diagrams like the ones drawn below left. Another type of categorical structure is double categories, where we have two-dimensional cells which are shaped like squares between two different types of arrows, which I've drawn as red and blue here. And they compose horizontally and vertically, which, when iterated, gives us compositions of grids like the one drawn above right. Finally, multi-categories have dots and n-to-1 arrows, which compose in the shape of trees. This tree here gives us a 6-to-1 arrow. The point of shape-independent category theory is that in all of these different structures, we have various similar constructions inspired by ordinary category theory. And it would be nice to be able to unify those constructions into a single general principle, which would then let us apply them to new types of category structures as they arise in practice. An example where this has already been done is the nerve. Classically, the nerve of a category is a simplicial set, where the choice of simplicial sets is inspired by the fact that two adjacent arrows and their composite together form a triangle. Three adjacent arrows and their composites form a tetrahedron, if you look at it the right way, and the same holds in higher dimensions with simplices. Two categories have an analogous nerve construction to theta-2 sets, where the objects of the category theta-2 are precisely the pasting diagrams, such as those below left, that compose into a two-cell in a two category. Likewise, double categories have a nerve into bisimplicial sets, where the bisimplices can be thought of as two-dimensional grids, and multi-categories have a nerve into dendroidal sets, whose objects are trees, the diagrams which can be composed in a multi-category. Mark Weber has shown that this is, in fact, examples of a general phenomenon, where any type of higher category, modeled by what is called a familial monad, has a fully faithful nerve construction to a presheaf category, canonically constructed from the monad itself. In my own work, I have two papers on the archive about this. The first one discusses the structure of familial monads with the goal of providing a specific formulation of what data you need to define a new type of higher category, namely the cell shapes, what arrangements of those cells you can compose, what equations there are between those. And I use this in various examples to define not just higher categories like cubical omega categories, but also mathematical objects like cyclic sets and certain cubical sets where you're adding not just composites, but also units. In the next paper, I generalized the construction of enrichment to higher categories, where classically we often want to replace the set of arrows between two fixed objects in a category with some other type of mathematical structure, like an abelian group or a topological space, or even a category, where we recover two categories. In my thesis, which collates these two papers, and in addition shows that when you enrich higher categories of a certain type in the category of higher categories of another type, you often get a new type of higher category. For instance, when you enrich double categories in categories, you get a three-dimensional category structure, which is not quite a three category and not quite a triple category. It has cells which look like this. They have a fixed square around their boundary, but the three-dimensional cells go between two squares which share that boundary, and they can compose in all three directions, such as the grid shown in the picture. The goal of this project is to continue generalizing features of category theory to all types of higher categories like these, including the Oneida lemma, growth and deconstructions, model category structures, and nearly anything else that you could hope to do with categories. Another project I've been working on this year at the Topos Institute is on modeling complex systems using polynomial functors. The motivation for this project is best explained, I think, using my own personal experience. In 2021, the Topos Institute existed and consisted of various members, such as those in this picture, and they're wired together in a way that describes how their information is shared between them. Separately from Topos, there's me, with my wires pointing out into the world to things not related to the diagram. But then in 2022, two different things changed about this picture. The Topos Institute changed how it was wired, opening up its inputs and outputs to allow for someone else to join. And the world rewired to connect those inputs and outputs to my own, so that it now makes more sense to include me inside the Topos box. Systems of this sort arise all over nature and technology, where you have evolving arrangements of different components, and there's evolutions can be nested and have complicated internal structure. A goal of this project is to start to make this complexity easier to understand using category theory. As a first step towards this, David Spivak and I defined dynamic operas and dynamic monoidal categories, which model complex systems for machine learning and economics. The idea here is that the systems we're describing are made up of wiring diagrams, which can both nest inside of each other by plugging a wiring diagram into any of the empty boxes, but also evolve at every level of the nesting structure. The nesting structure makes this operatic, and we ask that that structure is coherent with respect to the changes in the wires based on what the information that's flowing along. The formalism we use for this is polynomial functors and their coalgebras. Now, these are different from what you might have heard about from functor calculus. These polynomial functors go from set to set, and they look like classical polynomials, except the sum is a disjoint union, the coefficients are sets, and the exponents are sets as well. And all of this can be interpreted in the category of sets. In a more recent paper on the structure of polynomial functors, we showed that they have what we call a dependent structure, which in the dynamics means that the different boxes are the elements of a poset, where the relations in this poset describe causal dependency between the boxes, so that the output of one of the boxes might depend on the output of other boxes. In future work, we hope to use this structure to model even more complex systems and ways of solving complicated problems. Finally, K-theory is the study of how mathematical objects are built up out of finitely many smaller pieces. In classical algebraic K-theory, the objects in question are modules over a ring, which are built up from smaller pieces using direct sums and extensions. In combinatorial K-theory, we attempt to use similar techniques to prove results about mathematical objects that are more combinatorial in nature, like finite sets. A classical theorem of K-theory shows that for a ring R, the K-theory of its modules agree with the K-theory of chain complexes of those modules when we consider weak equivalences between. In joint work with Maru Sarazola, we extend this result to finite sets and many other combinatorial objects. The result we get is, again, that a K-theory for chain complexes of these objects is equivalent to the classical K-theory of finite sets. In case you're wondering, in a chain complex of finite sets, the differentials between sets are partial functions. However, classical K-theory is not able to construct the K-theory space for finite sets. So we have to use a new construction based on double categories, where the idea is that the two different types of arrows describe generalizations of the monomorphisms and epimorphisms that are central to the algebraic K-theory of R modules. In future work, we hope to continue extending such results, in particular to additional mathematical objects, such as algebraic varieties, which have also evaded description by many methods of classical K-theory. Thank you for listening, and please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any more questions about my work.